Greetings, my lovable cretins. As you can probably tell from the clips I use and the characters I've covered, I'm quite familiar with the Total War Warhammer series. In fact, I have to say that in 2016, when that game first launched, it stoked the fires of Warhammer once more in my gut. Even with the slight disappointment of Total War Warhammer 3's launch, I have to say I love the trilogy as a whole. It's given us the best look at Warhammer Fantasy battles in a video game, full stop. And it has stacked the entire world in its game space, as well as many of the characters that populate it. I say many of the characters, and not all, because, well, not every famous face from Warhammer Fantasy is in Total War Warhammer as it stands. Creative Assembly have done a damn good job at putting in a lot of these faces, but there are a few missing here and there. Today we'll take a look at these missing rats, persons and corpses and see why they need to be in Total War Warhammer. First up on our list is Thanquol. This one I believe has a very strong chance of making it into the game, but nevertheless he's not there yet, and so he makes the list. Simple as that. Thanquol, if you're not in the know, is the moustache-twirling, maniacal villain of the Glottkin and Felix books, Vermintide 2 and a few other Warhammer Fantasy books. He is the epitome of an evil Skaven. He is cowardly, sneaky, fairly powerful, and yet always foils his own great schemes due to him being nigh incapable of success. He would be a great fit to the roster of Skaven and their legendary lords, as he would give players a Grey Seer Lord, which strangely hasn't been added yet. He needs to be a legendary lord more than just a hero in my opinion, as it would feel odd slotting in a character with such ambition into someone else's army. Gameplay wise, you're going to have a lot of fun messing around with Thanquol. With his control of the Law of the Warp, he's going to be a great caster on his own, but put him on Bone Ripper and you could have a great candidate for a one-man Doom stack if CA gives him as much power as he deserves. Thanquol isn't just a joke, and has pulled off some impressive feats in the lore, such as wiping out an entire temple city of the Lizardmen and holding off a chaos invasion from Hell Pit. However, he does also screw up constantly, and this could work into his campaign mechanics greatly, either in his favour or against it. I mean, he summoned Scarbrand once. The rat is capable of a lot. With Tordrek and Felix already in the game, and Ulrika Stragov coming with the Chaos Dwarves, it's only a matter of time, I think, until we see Thanquol. Moving away from a bit of a meme of a character, we have a very serious one. The Lord of the Phoenix Guard does have one major problem that's probably prevented him from making it to the game so far, and that is his vow of silence. However, if we give Caradhrian some grunts of approval or denial, we can make this one work. He could work as a legendary hero in fairness, as we do have a healthy dose of High Elven Lords already in the game. However, I think that as a Lord, Caradhrian could provide a lot of campaign buffs in-game, especially to the Phoenix Guard, which is so far pretty much overlooked. He would also give us a super strong anti-large duelist that could be pitted against the Demon Lords that came about in Total War Warhammer 3. I'm not as sure about Caradhrian making it into the game as I am Thanquol, for example, but another reason I think our silent, serious elf could make it in is that he's got the basis for a very strong narrative campaign. With the prologue of Warhammer 3, we saw Creative Assembly can tell a good story in a strategy game, and Caradhrian's tale of transforming from a pompous elven noble to a servant of Asuryan could make for a very interesting story, especially if they change up his origins to pit him against whichever other lord he's added in with his lord pack. A bit of a pipe dream this one, but a lord that certainly could make it in nonetheless. The three Nurgle worshipping siblings that make up the Glottkin are not a personal favourite of mine in Warhammer's lore. For the most part, it can feel like they appear out of nowhere and are immediately given a power boost that makes other long-standing characters look like incompetent idiots. Their own background as well is mostly uninspired, and consists of a largely typical Chaos backstory where, under desperate measures, their father made an unknown deal with Nurgle. There are a few intriguing threads to pull at, like how the brothers are actually turned to Chaos fully by the actions of the Empire rather than direct interference from a god, but either way, their story is not why they deserve a spot on this list. Sometimes, the look of a character and the impact it can have on the battlefield is more than enough to get its place among the legendary lords. The Glottkin fill out this category perfectly, as from one look at their model you can't tell me you wouldn't want to see this disgusting behemoth and his brothers stomping through a Total War battlefield. Technically, we could see the Glottkin split into one or two lords, beginning with the scythe-wielding Otto or the wizard Ethrak, who gain their brother Gurek as a mount later in the game. In a similar vein to the Sisters of Twilight, Otto and Ethrak could work as a devastating melee and sorcerer pair, with Gurek then being added as their huge damage dealer. While the Glottkin will be an immensely powerful unit on the battlefield, this doesn't mean that CA shouldn't include them. For looks alone, these horrid plague boys should be brought in at some point. I know that Creative Assembly have said they want to avoid end times content, but with the great apocalyptic endings we see in Immortal Empires, they're already creeping closer to an end time scenario anyway, and so to have a situation where the Glottkin lead a plague army across the Empire and Bretonnia could be another great addition to the endgame. This could be the most expensive unit in multiplayer too, if the Glottkin's powers in the lore are reflected in the game, but considering their utility, they'll be worth the cost. We've just seen the reveal of the Chaos Dwarfs DLC, and while we're getting 3 legendary lords and a legendary hero to represent the Dowie Tsar, there are certainly more characters that could help fill out and diversify the angry, bearded roster. One such evil dwarf is Tordrek Hackhart. Tordrek was once a regular dwarf and a renowned engineer, but even as he was respected by his kinsmen, he wanted more. He wanted to be recognised as the best. It was this ambition that eventually led to him, accidentally, shoot his rival 12 times, killing him. This heinous crime led Tordrek to be exiled from the dwarven settlements, but he did not walk the mountains in solitude, instead taking his submergible ship known as the Black Kraken around the world until he eventually found the lands of the Dowie Tsar. Not much is known about Tordrek after that. There are very few images of him, but he's still out there, rocking around essentially as a Chaos Dwarf pirate in a demonic submarine. It is said that he made a deal with the demon in order to not only extend his life, but to bind him to the Black Kraken as well. This might make him a bit tricky to translate into the game, but I'm sure with Dwarven technology and Chaos Dwarf magic, he could figure out a way to fight on land as well as in the seas. We do have a fair few seafaring lords in the game already, but a pirate dwarf would certainly give us something fresh and give the Chaos Dwarves a more mobile legendary lord option too, as there's no need for Tordrek to start in the traditional realms of the Dowie Tsar. Given his relationship with the Dreadfleet as well, there's a few options for potential allies and stories to take on with Captain Hackhart. Before we wrap up our list, I'd like to give an honourable mention out of the way to Nagash and hopefully Neferata. Nagash seems all but a given at this point, and it seems he's only taken so long to arrive because CA will likely need to make some new units to really have the Master of Undeath stand out from the Tomb Kings and Vampire Counts armies. I'm hoping that Neferata could make it in as well, as it would be a great Lord pack to have the first Vampire and the first Necromancer join the game at once. Nagash is the most likely to make it here though, and so I just thought it would be best not to have him on the list, as I don't want to just go over what people have already said. But yes, an extremely powerful magic user like Nagash would certainly shift the balance of Total War Warhammer 3, and like the Glottkin but on an even greater scale, Nagash is probably going to be quite hard to balance. But he's just such a key part of the setting that if Creative Assembly was to move on to their next strategy project without including him, it would feel like a massively missed opportunity. He could even be the subject of another campaign, similar to the Vortex plotline or the main story from Total War Warhammer 3. There's a lot of potential for CA to run wild with Nagash, but it does seem like he's the most likely legendary lord to come out of the ones I've listed so far, which is kind of why he doesn't make this list, as it feels like it's just already granted he'll be there. Our final nod then does not go to the Master of Undeath, but it does go to an undead faction leader in Conrad von Carstein. I'm sure you're all very surprised that Conrad hasn't been included in the game yet, as I am as well. Conrad has been one of the most requested legendary lords since the release of Game 1, and while we do have a lot of playable vampires already, it does seem like we're missing what Conrad brings to the table. As a von Carstein who isn't very skilled in terms of magic or necromancy, Conrad offers a unique prospect of being pretty much a pure duelist on the battlefield. This could make for a new campaign mechanic centred around how he brings his armies to the fore without the skills that Manfred and Vlad have, for example. Conrad is more than just a brute on the battlefield though, and he's even managed some fairly cunning ploys, like when he sent a controlled zombie of the Count of Marienburg over to Altdorf to assume the imperial throne. Conrad was actually closer to becoming emperor through this than perhaps the other members of his family ever were. If only the corpse had been disguised better, history could have been very different indeed. We do have a lot of vamps in Sylvania, so it is possible that Conrad would have to be placed elsewhere in order to be viable in Total War Warhammer. But then again, he could always be a replacement choice for Manfred, or even Vlad if you wish. It's a tricky but not impossible lord to add, as we've seen plenty of other lords make their way into the game through similar unusual circumstances. I just hope that we can get our brutish bit of an idiot vampire into the game eventually. That about wraps up our list for today. With only 6 lords being covered, I can imagine there are more than a few characters you think should have made the cut. Trust me, there are plenty more that I want to see in the game. So let me know who you think you want to be brought in either as a free LC lord or a DLC legendary lord in the future. Until then though, thanks so much for watching, and stay ghouling out there.